Hi, everybody. Oh, my goodness. It's been a minute. I first of all, I'm so sorry. It's been a little while. Life has just been, how it goes, crazy. So, between work, spending a lot of time getting creative writing, uh, short stories, which are out there on the web. I might drop a link in the comments or something in case anyone is interested in that part of me. Um, Also, just, summer life, friends, planning my wedding. So, yeah, I am sorry I've been neglectful. And honestly, a lot of the last videos that I shared were a lot of the guts of what I wanted to talk about, anyways. So now I'm starting to just think about other topics and things that maybe have not been discussed in depth by other people, and if they have, I apologize if I've missed it. Um, Moving forward, if you ever have suggestions or things you want me to talk about, please let me know. Or if some of my past videos I've touched on things and you want to know more about that, just let me know because I am a relatively open book, obviously, with this channel, and I am happy to share that. Um, what I wanted to talk about today is the weird relationship that witnesses have, at least we had, with money growing up. Um, it's been talked about before a little bit about how we're not really prepared to deal with our finances very well when you are raised in a high control group for the real world or getting out into life. But I wanted to expand on that and really talk about the way it impacted me personally from time I was young till just, now even. So some of this I think is hopefully going to be, I have kind of two reasons I'm doing this. For one, I want anyone who is a never JDub to have some idea of the things that we've dealt with, especially if you are in or in a relationship or getting married to someone who's an ex-JW, especially if they're relatively new. Patience when it comes to dealing with anything financially with them, because we really were not taught really anything. And so have those the communication about money is probably going to be very different than if it was two people who were never JWs. The other reason is I wanted to kind of let other ex-JWs know, especially if you're recently out and or struggling to get your footing when it comes to like what's materialistic, because that was so ingrained in us, and what a healthy kind of view and of those things are. So I'm gonna give it a shot, and then I would love to hear feedback. Kind of if you want to share your experiences too, or if you just kind of add things that I've maybe missed or forgotten. So as always, comment and share whatever you like. I'm going to go way back to the beginning. I was again raised with a believing mother and a non believing father. I say that he had been baptized after he and my mom got married, kind of to support her. And then later he just faded. He was inactive until he was finally disfellowshipped. But, he was considered a non believer. And so he was the sole provider. My mom stayed at home and raised all of us. I'm the last of 7 kids. And so, as you can imagine, 7 kids at home and a wife, like a lot of work to make sure we had a roof over our head, things we needed, clothes. And I will say that part alone is extra difficult when you are a very active witness family, because, the boys in my family were growing quickly, both ended up being very tall, and so they were constantly growing out of their suits, which are not cheap. So the cost alone to clothe us and clothes for school, which all my siblings went except for me, um, as well as clothes for meeting, uh, special clothes for our assemblies or conventions, right? Because you had to get a new outfit, shoes for all those occasions. And then you talk about wintertime, because in the Midwest it gets real cold here. And so you had to have dress winter coats for meeting and field service. So it wasn't like just the average family with a lot of kids who have to have clothes for school and maybe some other recreational things. This was, I can imagine, a very high cost. That alone, let alone like feeding us all. So, of course, everything went to the bare necessities growing up. So we were, looking back on it, we grew up poor. I mean, that's just the way it goes. We didn't maybe realize it too much because we had a pretty active social life. Like, all the kids from the hall were at our house and stuff because there were just so many of us. So, all of those things. We played instruments, and so it was generally pretty lively. But like the house I grew up in, like we never had actual like finished floors. We lived the whole time there on subfloor, which is just like plywood that you put down and you eventually are supposed to put hardwood or something on it. We just never got to the point to be able to afford it. Cars. My family used to say that like cars were what Satan targeted. That was his way of trying to disrail us because our cars were always breaking down. Looking back on it, it's because they were complete wreck of cars. I mean, they were like old, used, lots of miles, beat up beaters. I mean, that's what we could afford. So of course they were always breaking down. I think one time I remember my parents bought a new car. It was totaled in an accident. And then that was kind of it. After that, it was always just, I mean, the stories I could tell just about cars breaking down. We used to have stick shifts, so we would park them on a hill, and we would know if we had to go to the meeting that night, we would just be prepared that someone was going to possibly have to push it to get it started, because back then you could pop a clutch, it's called, so you would push start it, and then we would all hop in and then go to the meeting. I mean, it was just a constant thorn in our side. And so that was an issue. But the other thing too was just the constant discussion of money. My mom being stressed out that, we weren't going to have enough money to make it to the convention that year, that we weren't going to have enough to pay the bills. Like, just, I mean, realistic things, right? When you have that many people. But it was just a constant barrage of like, I just heard it so much, and that money was so bad because you had to have it, but you didn't want too much of it. So it was just very unbalanced, the conversation surrounding it. Lots and lots of things when it comes to that. So we lived an extremely simple life. I mean, a lot of the things that we did then, people are kind of doing now to be like, I don't know, look out for the environment, right? Which is true. I mean, I carried some things over just because I realize it's better for the environment, but like, never had paper towels, never had Kleenex, Nothing that was really disposable was ever used in our house, which, looking back on it, good for us because we were being good to the environment, but man, that was kind of a pain when you were growing up. So my mom would, on the rare occasion, she would have a Ziploc bag. It would be washed like until it was basically falling apart so that she could reuse it. So we lived a very streamlined, very simple life, no frills. When my sister got married, my mom made all the dresses for the bridesmaid, all the food for the receptions, like just everything you could possibly do to cut the cost. We did it. We gardened. We didn't buy pre-made food. And as I say, a lot of those things I now kind of appreciate because it taught me certain skills. But when you're young and like, it was hard. It was hard to grow up that way. Not just, it's kind of tough to explain, but like, to be yay high and out, like chopping wood and hauling it because that's how you had to heat your house. Just a lot of responsibility and a lot of fear around not having money. That is not, of course, not JW specific. I realize that's much more common. Below poverty line is unfortunately still extremely common in this country. But the added pressure when you are a witness is it's not just always about just getting through the day, but then having to dress up in these clothes that money could have gone towards something better than a nice dress to go to a Kingdom Hall in, and then having to put on a face when you go to the Kingdom Hall, act like everything's fine, never want to take charity. Literally my mom handing me multiple times like the $2 she had in her purse to go put into the contribution box, and the constant reminder of the fact that the organization needed money, and then being reminded constantly that we didn't need to worry about these things too much because the end was coming any day. It was okay to take out a loan that you couldn't pay for. It was okay to go in debt because Jehovah was going to destroy all of those organizations any day. So I think looking back on it, my mom probably realized that she wished she had had some skill and helped support us slightly. I know for her the struggle was way more intense than it was for us kids growing up. But kudos to her, hats off. She did tell me when I was younger that basically, even though I was pioneering, that if I started working, I needed to learn some trade so that I could support myself and, of course, my ministry. But she did, even though I was a girl, encourage all of us girls to do that so that we didn't have to rely on getting married and a man taking care of us. I think she wanted us to have slightly better, but still wanted us to have a job that would only support our full-time ministry. So I went to trade school, got into the industry that I am in now. I immediately bought myself a new vehicle, like immediately. And it was brand new, and it was super frowned upon because it was brand new. It was not a four-door vehicle, gasp, and I was pioneering. But it was kind of like my thing. Like, I wanted something reliable. I finally could afford it, quote, afford it. But the reason I did it was because it was above my means, but it was 1996, I want to say 97, 96 or 97. And at that time, we were absolutely positive. It was like the generation of 1973, 74. They were so sure the end was coming in 1975. That's how my generation was feeling about 1999. There was talk that, the end was going to come before then. The age of the first generation, this is before the overlapping generation. And then on top of it, Stephen Lett had been our circuit overseer, and he had said multiple times from the platform that we would never see the year 2000. The end would come well before then. And since he was of the anointed and he was the circuit overseer, we took him at his word. And there were some things in print, if I remember, that nodded to that, if didn't outright say it. So I took out a loan like, oh, well, it's a 5-year loan. I'm never going to have to pay it all back. I'll just do what I can. And as you can imagine, 1999 came, no end of the world, Johanna in debt. And that was the beginning of me being 19, 20 years old and getting into a financial pickle right out of the gate. So then you have on top of it, this was the first time I was disfellowshipped. So I'm out of my parents' house like overnight, living on my own, have to pay for an apartment. So you have rent, you have all the utilities, food, insurance, car payment, and I'm making like minimum wage, maybe at that time, a little over because I was starting out. So I started working 2 jobs, trying to just make ends meet. Thankfully, I didn't have a family and it was just me, but the stress of it, because I literally had no idea. I had no clue. I remember my electricity was getting ready to be shut off because I couldn't pay the bill. And I was beside myself and I didn't know what to do. And I came into work and I was like an emotional basket case. And my coworker said, well, just call them. She said, all you have to do is call them, let them know that you can't pay now, but make sure you do your checkbook and you can figure out how much you can pay and when, and they will work out a payment plan for you. No idea. That was the first glimpse of anything that I knew. And because I was single, alone, no family, that were all my family, my immediate family were all witnesses. I didn't have anybody to talk to. All my friends, I had no friends that I grew up with. I had nowhere to go for help. You know, if I had a big bill, which I ended up with, it was all me. You know, I didn't have parents who taught me about savings, taught me about what a 401k was. I didn't even know what that was until I was like pushing 30 years old. And I had been working in an office since I was 20. I didn't have anybody who had helped save for an education for me. I had to pay for my own trade school even when I decided to take it. I didn't have anybody who, if I needed help with anything when it came to that, to be able to help me. And a lot of parents now, they're able to either put money aside for their kids so that their kids can go to college and get an education, or they at least help them to understand how to take out loans, how to get grants, like whatever that may be. And I didn't have any of it. So again, I'm not saying I'm alone. I know people are listening to this and they're like, yeah, me too, or whatever, and that's fine. But I just want people to understand, especially if you are a never JW, that when I say we weren't taught, at least I wasn't taught anything about money, it was literally nothing. How to balance a checkbook, no idea. What APRs were, that you had to pay interest on loans and on credit cards, no idea. This was all completely new and foreign. It was like speaking a different language when I started to try to understand finances and the finance world. Even to the point where I thought since I couldn't pay off my car loan in the time that was allotted, I thought I could just tell the bank like I did my electrical bill or whatever, and they would like just let me keep paying on it. That's not how it works. I learned the very hard way. So I didn't have any savings of my own. I had $0 in savings of my own. Of course, my parents had never been able to put anything aside for us. So it was like starting from the basement. It wasn't even from the ground up because I didn't have any concept of finances like whatsoever. And then I would think about how weird it was because there was such a double standard when you were a witness when it came to materialism. I say that word and I hate it. When it came to people who were, they talked about how bad materialistic things were and how bad materialism was. But I remember, there's inevitably somebody in the congregation or the circuit or wherever it was that had a monocule of wealth. They were doing well for themselves. Nice house, nice cars, maybe even a swimming pool. And you can bet it's that house that people always wanted to be invited to. That gossip factor of like condemning them because they were working so hard, even if these poor people still made all the meetings, even if they made it in field service regularly, people still bashed them for the fact that they had nice things. Looking back on it, I realized it was just probably 110% jealousy, as well as trying to do what we were told to do because you were hearing materialism condemned from the platform. But then on the flip side of it, those same people that bashed brother and sister rich men would jump at the chance to socialize, to ride in their new car in field service, to swim in their pool in the summer. Like, it was just such an unhealthy, unbalanced, unrealistic view of money. And I remember an elder who worked in financial planning said in a car group, he was going home that day after work because he was going to finish his like living will or something like that. It was something to do with the financial planning for his demise. And someone was really shocked and they said, well, brother so and so, the end is going to come well before you have to ever worry about dying. And he said, yeah, that's the case, but I could get hit by a truck tomorrow. So I like to live my life as if Armageddon is coming tomorrow, and I like to plan my finances as if it never is. And he said that, and it kind of stuck in my brain. And man, he got like terribly counseled for that. Surprise, he did end up passing away about 20 years later of natural causes, old age. So good for his family, for him looking out. I think the other thing too, during that time we were constantly being told that we were living in the final stage of pregnancy. And I'm sorry, I've never been pregnant. I don't know what trimester that is. I forgot. But anyways, that would be the trimester that they would compare it to, and they would use this scripture about the woman having pangs, and they would use that as the end coming. And I mean, it was constantly used. And then they would say that, the end was going to come for sure. We didn't know exactly when, but it was going to come. So that expectancy of like the end coming was so real and so ingrained, and literally every day waking up and expecting that was it, that I didn't think twice about it when I was struggling to literally put carrots in my refrigerator to eat when I was single and completely on my own. I didn't think twice about taking out a credit card when the offer came to me with whatever APR, 55% interest rate. I took it because I wasn't ever going to have to pay it off. Bad, terrible things that ends up doing. So obviously I didn't have savings. Then I had credit cards on top of it. And the interest alone was just absolutely devastating and killing me. And then I couldn't finish paying off my vehicle. So I had to file bankruptcy in my early mid-20s, I guess. And I just remember being like really upset and devastated. And then I just thought, well, it doesn't matter because Armageddon's coming anyway. So even then, even though I went through all that, it still didn't really teach me too much because I was still so mentally in that I didn't learn exceptionally well from that first round of mistakes. However, the good thing is I had to at least put food in my mouth. I had to at least put gas in my piece of shit junker car that I ended up with because so I had to work. So I kept working and my job kind of naturally evolved where I got promoted and ended up changing. I mean, I stayed in the industry, but changing employers. And so I started doing much better financially for myself. But still, I was, whatever, late 20s by then. And I was still way behind my peer class because they had all those things that I talked about, either their parents helping them save some when they were still young, or at least showing them how to balance a flippin' checkbook. So I was still behind them in a lot of aspects. So I just kept working, and then I realized like, oh, I have to work like really, really hard to support myself. And so because I had always struggled financially, the poverty mindset they call it just really kicked in, and I just started working all the time, squirreling away kind of what I could, but still trying to dig out of that pit financially, because I repeated a pattern, right? I filed bankruptcy, but then immediately got another credit card as soon as I could. So it was just so dumb. And so I was way behind the 8 ball with all of that. And then I started doing better. Then I got married. And he was not working. I take that back. He was working somewhat on and off when we first got married. Then he lost his job due to sexual harassment, which of course I didn't know until later. And then he started just kind of working odd jobs, and the odd jobs would be basically just enough for him to buy his alcohol. Like, that's all he contributed. And so I'm working, and then he did, and because I married him so we could both get reinstated because he was not a witness he was disfellowshipped like me. So we got married so we could both get back into the organization. And then we did, and then he started just like buying things, running up charges, and he was still going by that mentality that we both were raised with. The end's gonna come. It doesn't matter about creditors. I found out later he had filed like bankruptcy like 3 times or something. So you have him buying snowmobiles and dirt bikes or whatever. And then you have me like working all the time, just trying to literally keep food on the table, pay the minimum balance on whatever loans and consolidated loans he'd taken out just to get by. And I would just be like stressed out and still studying for all the meetings, going to the meetings, going field service, auxiliary pioneering when there were 5 weekends in a month because I could go out and get enough field service in on Saturday and Sunday to make the time. And he's not working at all, and he's just constantly telling me it doesn't matter because Armageddon is coming soon. And then we go to a convention or an assembly or the Sunday Watchtower, and they would reiterate what he's saying. So I had to just have faith and keep just burning it at both ends, putting the bare minimum into my 401k because any more than that, God forbid you retire with an actual pension. And then the end's not coming. We're getting deeper in debt. And then he would tell me, he would say, you need to talk to them at work and you need to get a raise. You need to get them to give you a raise because you're working too hard and we need more money. I am not kidding you. So then he had squirreled away a bunch of money, and I told him one day, I was like, we've got to pay the whatever light bill. I can't do it. Like, I have everything paid. I can't do it. And he said, well, I'll call and defer it. And I said, no, it needs paid. Like, I've already deferred it. Like, it needs paid. And he was like, okay, well, we'll figure something out. Then a couple days later, he says to me, I called, I got it deferred another week. I was like, fine. And then we had to go to the store for something that night. We went to the store. He said, go bring the car up and pick me up at the front. And I was like, well, why? And he said, just do it. I went up and he had bought a fucking whatever inch TV for like $900. And I was so mad and I was crying and I was like, I literally cannot like keep the lights on. And he just said, you're going to enjoy it. I know you're going to enjoy it. And so that was this, so then I had ulcers but then I was constantly being counseled by him or the elders that I was working too much, that I was too concerned with material things. Again, kind of a piece of junk car, a house, but it was nothing fancy, nothing that was not a bunch of fancy trinkets and doodads except for what he was buying on my credit. And it was just this, like, I had no healthy relationship with buying things for yourself or savings. It was just completely out of whack and no realistic education or even confirmation that like, yes, you're right, you shouldn't be putting all this stuff on credit. Because if I would say something to the elders, they would say, well, the end is, yes, we do have to pay back man's things to man, but at the same time, Armageddon's going to come well before all of your things are due, all your credit is due. And I just remember being like, feeling really guilty and sad because I was a bad witness and I thought I was weak or I was doing something wrong, because if I would say, like, I need help with the finances, you need to work more, and he'd say, I'm auxiliary pioneering this month, and I'd say, but we need to keep the water on, I was the one that was in the wrong. I was the one that was counseled. So I had no like healthy relationship with finances, what it meant to take out credit or anything like that. It was it's just mind numbing to look back on and to realize that like everything rested on my shoulders, and I at the same time had to be submissive, which those two things make you feel like you're being like mentally, like you are losing your mind. It's the only way I know how to describe it. And then on top of it, we lived in a area of town that was lower income, and so our congregation's special needs talk every single time was about giving more. We constantly heard about how important it was for us to donate more. We shared our Kingdom Hall. There were 3 congregations that went there. So they would read our finance report, and I used to be really confused because I didn't understand how we were in our congregation like paying all this when you had these other 2, one of them being an affluent congregation. It always seemed out of whack to me. But then they would constantly just bombard you. And we heard the widow rubbing her 2 nickels together story incessantly. Like, I mean, you heard it multiple times a month. Read the same scripture, tell the same story, even if it's all you have. Then they pull out these articles from the Watchtower or experiences from the yearbook about people how they gave their last 2 cents and they came home and somebody had left a bag of groceries on their front stoop. Well, nobody ever left groceries on my front stoop when I had no nickels to donate because I had no nickels. And it just, the guilt that they layered upon you, not even for like wanting to take extravagant vacations or anything, but just because you were trying to get by. I was just like trying to do my best to get by. And yet they made you feel guilty even for that. And it is the weirdest concept. And I know that other witnesses feel this and have felt this, but the anguish that it causes, because you lay in bed at night and you think to yourself, how in the world am I going to pay the mortgage? And you immediately it's followed by, Jehovah will provide. Why am I worrying about this? But then you're like, how's he going to provide when I'm the only one working? So that cycle of doubt, guilt, fear, doubt, guilt. I mean, it's the perfect triangle, the Bermuda Triangle of insanity. It just is. So looking back on it, I actually am very grateful that I had my career. I'm grateful that I knew at that point I was understanding finances better. And I myself had lived kind of as simply as I could, and I wasn't doing anything too extravagant, because when I did get out and I got out of the marriage, disfellowshipped, woke up, all those things, I was on a path already that thankfully made it easier. And I know there are so many ex-witnesses, especially women, who were never taught any skills when it came to going to a trade school or balancing a checkbook. So I understand and appreciate and am grateful for the fact that I did at least have a job and I could support myself, even if it was a struggle. And my hat is off to all XJW women, especially those who are housewives and never been given the freedom to at least find their footing that way. And I will say that it's scary, but it's still at least worth leaving. And I think the other XJW community is always going to be there to support those women and help them to get their footing. I know I absolutely would. But what we have to go through just to literally understand what good percentage rates are, or if it's okay to have a conversation about what we're going to put away to spend on, I don't know, an annual vacation, which even that is looked down upon in the organization. And yet, the governing body still has the nerve to continue this double talk when it comes to finances and money. And it just pisses me off. They tell you to live a simple life, to do even, menial jobs, whatever they are, as long as it supports you in your service. And then they turn right around and they tell you to give them whatever you have. And it is disgusting that people are working their butts off, continuing to spend spare time in field service and at meetings, to then support 8 guys in New York and their families and their minions in a luxury compound because they're being told to. It is absolutely psychotic. And so I am glad that I'm out and awake. I'm glad that I figured out some of the things that I did, even though I am in a much better state than a lot of people. I still am behind the 8 ball when it comes to a lot of people in my age bracket, just because, we were all put way behind the starting line when the gun went off. So that's kind of my rant about it. But like I say, I just wanted people to understand the other part of this too. I think there are a lot of people that leave the organization and they immediately jump into monetized ways of sharing their experience about being a witness. And I have absolutely nothing against that. But I think it's because they themselves don't have a lot of other opportunity at that point. And I think we need to understand that if you ever were a witness and you did not have some of the opportunities, I mean, that even I had to be able to go to a trade school and figure out something else to do, that once you're out, you really have to kind of do whatever you can to keep a roof over your head, especially for all of us who don't have parents to support us. And I don't mean like paying our bills, but maybe helping us with our bills, or knowing that they're going to be there in the clutch if there's a health emergency or something happens where we need help that a lot of worldly parents would automatically provide. So I think as a community, XJWs, we need to understand that a little with each other, but also it's worth it. You're never too old to learn a trade or to take your knowledge that you have, because we all were taught great things like public speaking, and try to establish yourself in this big scary world and support yourself and your family as best you can. That's it. I don't really have a whole lot else to say on this subject, but I just wanted people to know that they're not alone. A lot of us were in the same boat, but also you're validated if you still harbor resentment over being set back the way that we were in so many ways. And I just don't know that the financial aspect is talked too frequently, because I think some of us are just scared to share those skeletons in our closet, but also to say, hey, I need help. Like, I don't understand the best way to get a car loan, or whatever the case is. You know, ask, whether it be, you know, your friends or family that aren't witnesses, or a good financial advisor. It's worth it. Armageddon isn't coming tomorrow. We hopefully aren't going to get hit by a bus, so we indeed have to plan financially for our futures. So that's it. I am going to be back more frequently, I hope, and certainly hit me up if you have anything you'd like to add, or you have any questions or comments. Like, follow, share, all those doodads. See me on Insta. See me on Twitter. I think that's it. So until next time, have a wonderful, happy, thrilling, beautiful, cult-free day, and happy Halloween.